That's the beauty of the show, Dan Pink, is that once I hit record, we've already kind of slid into this. It's a rolling start off a stoplight, and so that people get that opportunity. One thing I noticed with a lot of people's,
if you'll pardon the phrase, we've already begun catching up.
Yes, we have. That's the thing I love about it, though. One thing I love about this format is that it doesn't have to be just like TV. It shouldn't be just like TV. We start in media res. I'm forever fascinated by people who start a live video and wait for the audience to show up, because then the playback of that video is going to be a fool standing around looking at their camera and looking down at their desk for however many minutes, which is not engaging. So we start at the start. Daniel Pink, thanks for catching up with me today.
It is fantastic to be with you, especially I didn't realize you were going to whip out your Latin in media res. I'm impressed.
I went to several different universities, never quite finished. And one of my favorite teachers at all was at a junior college called Newbury Junior College, which was held at an elementary school in Revere, Massachusetts. Huh. Do you want to know how you know you're not at a higher place of learning, Dan? You sit at elementary school desks with the little thing, except you're a full grown human being. So my knees come up through that thing. And I'm a giant gentleman. So that didn't work. So this guy used to say all the time, when someone starts to talk about, things to me professionally, I always stop them and say, tell it to me like I'm 6 years old. And I have used that forever. I use, when I write my blog post, I look and make sure that my writing is like about a second grade or third grade level. And so I almost never roll out in media res. So you get the in media res.
I love it.
Scott's joining us from Southern Maine on another rainy day. I'll tell you one thing about Scott, who's a coach. He always wants to know kind of the stumbles along the way, because there's a lot of people who only know Daniel Pink, the multi-time successful New York Times bestselling author, which also, I was a New York Times bestseller and also not a #1 New York Times bestseller. So I saw that on the old website. I have one question right out the bat about books. People have asked this question a lot of me, and I have an answer, but not everybody does. What's your favorite book, no matter what? Your books, though. Only your books. What's your favorite book you wrote?
I truly don't have one.
Son of a...
Yeah. I don't have one. In part because, not to get completely metaphysical on you here, but each book, in a sense, was written by a different person. Because I was at a different stage in my life. So... It's very hard to compare. I don't want to, the go-to analogy here, Chris, always is children. I have 3 kids. Do I have a favorite kid? Absolutely not. I have a least favorite kid. I have a least favorite kid. No. So on that, it's hard. I truly don't have a favorite.
It's hard to pick. I'll tell you mine. It's To Sell Is Human.
Oh, thanks.
And I will also say another thing about that really quick is that I forget who it was. Oh, I remember now. I think it was Michael Port. I have a habit of loving people's book, and I don't know any of your figures. I'm not like a book scan guy. I don't know, but I almost always tend to love the most one of your books that didn't do so well with people, because for some reason it really speaks to me in some other way. And I always think that somehow that's what cues me to the person, is that there's this thing that didn't quite get picked up, but I see it and I go, oh my gosh, that's the thing I want. So I don't know which of yours was like
then your favorite should be Free Agent Nation, because that didn't.
Yeah. So many people love that book. Are you serious? That was the one?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one that is the least. That one performed the worst.
Now that
not even close.
Oh my gosh, that's interesting to me because
that's basically Chris Brogan running a marathon. It's like, that's huffing and puffing and coming in at the end.
That's right. Oh my God.
To your users, to your audience, Chris, we were talking about running and marathons earlier. So because we were right before you went live, we were catching up.
Yes, we were catching up. So when the student's ready, the teacher will appear kind of book. That's what Jack Vincent says
thanks,
from
Jack.
over in the lands of Spain. It's funny about that. That's totally true. And with Free Agent Nation, the book I wrote that's probably closest to that, but not anywhere like the same topic line, was I wrote this book called The Freaks Shall Inherit the Earth. And it was about entrepreneurship for weirdos, misfits, and world dominators. Yeah. And that book really could have been subtitled, Don't Hire Chris Brogan for a Speech.
Really? Why?
Yeah.
I love the subtitle.
Well, because the big companies really don't want to hire someone that's teaching entrepreneurship, number one. Similar to Free Agent Nation saying,
that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah. So my next book is Who Do I Got to Make Out Around With Here to Get a Speech? So recently the speech I saw you perform is probably the weirdest way to say that, is when. And you did it at Workfront event last year, back when there were still events with humans in them. I was amazed by the premise of the book because it really settled this sort of, there's a little bit more than an early bird and a night owl. Do you want to give your sort of minute version of what the premise of When is for people?
Well, the premise of When is that we make all kinds of timing decisions in our lives. We decide when to do stuff all the time, and not only in a given day. When should I begin my writing? When should I begin my, whatever else I'm doing? When should I schedule a call like this? But also more episodic timing. So when should I start a project? When should I abandon a project that's not working? And we tend to make those decisions in a totally half-assed way. That's the wrong way to do it. There is a extraordinary but vast body of science out there that gives us the evidence for how to make those decisions in a strategic, smart, intelligent, evidence-based way.
And that's what you then go on to cover in that, is just that there's different times for different parts, and that the one surprise for me was that I thought it was going to be locked into one thing, pick which Game of Thrones person you are, kind of a thing, and I was going to be like, oh, I have learned that I'm this person. And what I really found was that it's about timing for a lot of different opportunities, not just one, not which type of bird am I, kind of a thing.
Right.
So for instance, talk about, you said that there may be different times of day to make financial decisions and that sort of thing. You want to talk?
I'll talk to you at a high level, because that is an important, Chris, that is an important aspect of it. So let me start at the 30,000 foot level and quickly descend to the treetops, more or less. Okay. So here's what we know. The day is a fundamental unit of time. Other things are less fundamental. A week is not fundamental because it's made up. Human beings decided how long a week is. A second even is not a fundamental unit of time because humans decided how long it is. But a day is a fundamental unit of time because we have no control over it, right? We're stuck. We can't just say, a day should be 22 hours. Doesn't work if we inhabit this planet. And so the day is a fundamental unit of time. And here's what we know about the day in terms of our performance and our emotions. Our brain power, our cognitive abilities don't remain constant over the course of the day. Okay? They change. They change in material ways, they change in significant ways, and they change in predictable ways. And so the best time to do something in the course of the day depends on what you're doing. And there is a relatively simple set of design principles that allow you to navigate the day more effectively.
And so as you walk through that, it's interesting because obviously it has a lot of application to a lot of places. And as a professional speaker, as someone who, makes a chunk of your money, if not the lion's share of it, I guess, besides, maybe paid research on giving these kinds of speeches, where's it resonated the most? And I know you span. I mean, this is a book built for spanning. Where does it resonate the most, have you found? Or who rang your phone the most in 2019 for this kind of a thing?
You know what? It's interesting. Like for me, I consider myself like first, second, and third a writer. That is where I spend like the bulk of my time, the bulk of my mental energy. Mm-hmm. And so that to me is so central to that, like that's the core, and anything else is like on the periphery. And so one of my sort of measures of that is who emails me about the book. And I've always, since the early days of Free Agent Nation, I've tried to be as receptive as I possibly can to reader email, because it tells you so much about what's working and what's not working. And to your point, I can't remember whether it was before we went live or not, but about whether people understand it. When you were talking about how explained it to me like a 6-year-old, like what's confusing people, what's not confusing people. And so for this, there have been a few things. Number one, I guess two big things. Number one is, it all has to do with the day. Number one is the idea that people are, I think, are realizing that they are making these daily win decisions in the wrong way. And in fact, they're not even making decisions about when to do stuff in the course of the day. It's just kind of happening to them. And if they're more intentional and more deliberate, they can perform better. The second thing goes to what you were hinting at a little bit, Chris, which is the idea of what's called a chronotype. A chronotype is your natural inclination to wake up early and go to sleep early, to wake up late and go to sleep late, or are you somewhere in the middle? And what we know from this entire field called chronobiology is we have a distribution of these so-called chronotypes. About 15% of us are very strong early people. Naturally wake up early, go to sleep early. About 20% of us are very strong evening people. Wake up late and go to sleep late naturally. And about 2/3 of us are in the middle. But we sort of lean toward the early people. And what I've heard is that I've heard a lot from that 20% who are the night owls, who are saying, wait a second, I'm not a slacker like everybody tells me. I'm not lazy like everybody tells me. I don't sleep all the time like everybody tells me. I'm not late to work like everybody tells me. I've always known that I do my best at a time of day that is different from the traditional corporate world. This is something I'm going to show to my boss, or this is something I'm going to show to my ex-boss to tell her why I quit.
So I just heard from Carol in Montreal that Dan just upended my reading queue. He now owns my next 3 reading slots. So
thank you, Carol.
And Carrie points out, because Carrie in the comments using her previous law experience to point out that Daniel Pink's books include the long-running New York Times bestseller When, A Whole New Mind, as well as the #1 New York Times bestseller Drive, and also To Sell Is Human. So Carrie is one of the people who is high up in the lands of marketing profs, runs her own show for marketing profs, runs Punching Out with Katie and Carrie, which is a Punch Out. Sorry, I always do that. Punch Out with Katie and Carrie, which is a show that's about what do you do when you're not working? When you punch out, then what? So, my little feint towards asking you what you do when you're not working is kind of stealing one of Carrie's things. So you have an interesting crowd here. When you just said what you said about chronotypes and all that, by the way, I'm going to ask one thing and then I'll ask the chronotype question.
Sure.
One difference between a Daniel Pink book and every Chris Brogan book is that you do a massive amount of research. What does the research look like before? Like, how much research went into when, let's say? You say, what does it look like? Can I show you what it looks like? Please, let's go. By the way, I want a room raider to look at your room.
Okay, so I'm working on a new book right now, Chris.
Okay.
And this one requires a significant amount of research. And I'm actually I'm not a cool like digital guy like you. I'm a very analog guy. So I actually like paper. I like pencils.
Whoa.
Yeah, hold on. Just wait. And I like file folders. Okay, so things like this. Okay, here, hold on. I'll show you. I like file folders. You can see that right here. Okay.
This episode of Catch Up brought to you by Staples.
With papers and things.
Wait a minute. Look at the very end of it. Look at the label.
Yeah, but okay. So I can explain that label.
You're a brother label man.
Oh. Okay. Hold on, man.
Oh my gosh. Hang on a minute. Yeah, Steve needs to see all of this. That's the screen capture right there.
I love my labeler. And here's the other thing. Now, this is something, Chris, where I'm sort of showing my age. Where I'm sort of showing my age, which is that I rely heavily on what are called, here, let me show you, what are called red welds. I don't know if people remember these things. This is a red weld, if anybody remembers those things. So I basically keep the Redwell company in business. So, okay, so somebody said something about getting things done. I'm a total GTD guy. I'm a total GTD guy. All right, so here we go.
Golly.
All right, so we got these. Now, here's the thing, Chris. This is this new book. So I want you to, I can't bring them all over here. Take these things.
Yep.
And multiply them by 30. That's the research.
You somehow dragged Chip Griffin in here. I don't even know how that worked, but he loves Redwells. I didn't even know.
How can you not love Redwells? And so today, my research task today, after I get off the phone with you, Chris, is that I have 4. Here we go. The first thing that I have to do before lunch is I have to read these 4 papers printed out on paper. Okay. Which I will underline with my
pencil.
With my pencil.
With your pencil.
So for me, Chris, I'm basically living in 1957.
Do you have a mechanical typewriter that you write your books on as well? Or have you moved up to like a Selectrix or something?
No, but here's the thing, man. I have the equivalent of an electric typewriter because I use Word. Like all my cool writer friends, probably you too, use Scrivener and all those kind of groovy, cool kid things. I'm a Word guy. I don't even I won't use Google Docs. I use Word.
See, I'm a Google Docs guy, but that's
I use Word.
That's almost Word.
I use Word. I don't use Google Docs. The cool kids, as you know, Chris, always use Scrivener. I like Word. The only reason that I use Word is that my MacBook Pro doesn't run WordPerfect.
My kid makes emulator platforms for a living, so if you want one that runs WordPerfect, he can flip it on a USB for you. Daniel, you must have a big ass shredder.
Who said? Okay, so was that? I do. Unfortunately, I can't show you my shredder because my shredder. So here's the setup at Pink Ink World Headquarters. So this is my garage. Okay, this is my garage. It's a 1-car garage. I live in Washington D.C. And this is a 1-car garage from our house was built in like 1924, something like that. So it's a 1-car garage, and we refurbished it into my office. I live right there. That's my house right there. 22 steps out the back door. And the shredder, this is a long-winded way to make a very small point. My shredder is in the basement, and it is, I think, technically, like the actual make is a big ass shredder. I have a giant shredder.
That is so amazing to me. That is so amazing on so many reasons. And
I use a whiteboard. So there's a whiteboard right over. There's actually a pretty cool whiteboard over here, which I can share. I'll show you. Hold on.
I was just gonna say there's no way he's turning this camera around, but he totally is. Oh, look at the view.
So you see that right there?
Oh my gosh.
Here
so
we go.
You go up there and you write like a 1 foot tall like gallon of milk?
No, and then this is my view. So I look out in my backyard.
That's beautiful. That's a good writing view.
It is a good writing view.
Anne Hanley from Marketing Profs in her tiny house. She has a little shed that she's made into a tiny house that she writes in and all that sort of thing. This is my family, my especially one of my daughters. She calls it the shed. Like dad, go out to the shed. To me, it's dad go to the shed. It's like a punishment. To me, it's also it's such a flex that in DC, where space is not, quite a premium. You've got this nice garage with actual trees that are not planted by humans 4 years ago. Like it's a view.
Well, barely. I mean, you see the depth of my yard. Like my next door neighbor is, I don't know how many.
It's about 2 or 3 dans long. I get it. Yeah.
But. Yeah. I mean, literally, my next door neighbor is the fence separating my house from the next door neighbor's house is maybe slightly further away, only slightly further away than I am from this bookshelf back here.
Gotcha.
So it is, it's these like little tiny postage stamp lawns.
I have to say, which is, by the way, for someone who, lives in a condo building with, people that do the lawn, I so very much appreciate postage stamp lawns because in my mind, that's less for anyone to have to do anything with. So it's kind of a thing. Very much appreciate that. I have to say, it's really interesting how alive you came when we got to talk about your paper supplies and all that. It's a fascinating insight, though. Really, the comment stream, I couldn't really keep up with it because they were like going nuts for it all. Everybody evidently knew what a Redwell was, but me. I thought Redwell was when I actually finished a few chapters before looking at my phone again.
Thank you, but yeah,
that's all I got. Try the veal. Yeah, I'm thrown. So. this now, it would have made sense a moment ago, but I left it so long that now we're at 90-degree segue turns. Chrono Types. We are now working asynchronously more often. That word came from, our mutual friend, Alex Shootman over at Workfront. Alex pointed out the fact that we're working asynchronously, which means that people's chronotypes done well, leaders could really work with and complement people's chronotypes, but are they? And have you had any people ask for that sort of a thing?
Yeah. So on the first part, absolutely. One of the things about this particular moment is that people who are able to work at home, people who have, whose means of production is a computer, can actually configure their schedules in a way that is consistent with their chronotypes. And I think that's actually a good thing. So there isn't an 8 a.m. staff meeting necessarily that everybody has to be physically present at. So I think that's generally good. It could be that this is the moment that offices are a little bit more accommodating. But what always surprised me is how much, even in 2020, early 2020, how much managers at organizations felt secure, or as if they were doing their job, if they could just physically see people, if they had, if they could monitor people in some way. And that's just, and the thing is that the most talented people don't want that at all. The most talented people don't want to be monitored. They don't want to be controlled. They want to operate based on self-direction. They're willing to work in organizations for good bosses who set clear goals and that sort of thing, but they want to be able to get there on their own. So this moment might crack that a little bit. The other thing is that, at some level in remote working, fewer people know that you're a night owl. So you can get away with that. And for me, it's been sort of interesting in that I've been working at home for 20 years. And even I sometimes fall prey to the early bird gets the worm belief, which is not necessarily the case. I mean, I naturally fall asleep at about midnight and wake up at about 8, which is a little bit out of, so I'm in the middle, but leaning toward Lark. But even that's still a little bit out of sync with a lot of corporate cultures. So, if I don't get into my office by, until, if there are many offices in this country where I didn't get in until 9:30, which is what I happened to do today, where I would be like, oh, Pink is slacking. Oh, he's not committed. Oh, what's he doing? Oh,
Isn't that so strange? I my last job where I was technically an employee, although as senior level team person, my last job like that, it was almost 2 hours away one way because of traffic. So I'm at the very northern tip of Massachusetts. I go through Boston, or at the worst, like way around it, all the way down to the South Shore to Canton, Massachusetts, which is practically Rhode Island. You could turn around in Rhode Island and get back up. And I kept getting more and more grumpy about the fact that I was there as like a futurist. They were trying to give me titles like entrepreneur in residence and those sorts of things. And I said, and you think a 4-hour trip both ways is the future? Because I'll kill myself right now. I'm wicked into killing myself. So this is a reason. And so that's definitely, that's part of what made me push out the door. So I hear you on that. And I think one of those sentences you don't want to say because it sounds so worse is because 100,000+ people have died, millions of people have contracted this virus just here, is that this was the wake-up call a lot of we technology types have needed to say, look, button share management, you were still doing it. You thought you weren't. You thought you were progressive and all that. And I feel like, the digital channel, people just weren't embracing the digital channel. And whoa, they suddenly had no business the minute they couldn't do their face-to-face events. So I don't know. I've got that feeling, and I don't have a question per se. I just want to hear that you also felt that and you thought, oh, well, now they're going to get it because some of what you've professed points to that, even though it doesn't necessarily require technology to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that's interesting to me is, when you take a time like this, how you look at the situation really matters. And so I like sometimes to flip things around. One of the ways that I sort of try to understand things is to flip things around. So I think about like, what's the opposite of this, or what does this look like? Forgive the cliche, through the other end of the telescope. And I think that as clunky as these you're not using Zoom, Chris, but as like I was on a Zoom call last night at 8, And people are I got a high school student who's completely zoomed out
Yes.
from studying on Zoom. And so we think about all those kinds of glitchy things and things we don't really like. But looking at the other end telescope, it's pretty remarkable. Like, because here's what happened. You had for decades, as you know, Chris, companies saying, oh man, no, we can't have much of our workforce remote. No, that would never work. Right. And then in 3 days, they did it. No committees planning it, no strategic plan to get it all done. Yeah, exactly. They just said, oh shit, we have to be working remotely, go. And and it actually worked pretty well. And that's kind of remarkable. Really? and that tells us something. And I think so there's so much Zoom hate right now. Right. But I think looking at it through the other end, it's like, my God, like you had large organizations, literally tens of millions of people who made a transition that people didn't think was possible. They made it almost instantly with no planning and very little direction. That's extraordinary. That's the journalism. He says that's the story.
You're not wrong about that. Utterly true. Joel Comm said, I have to say hello to you because they haven't met in person.
Hey, Joel.
Joel. Yep. Joel's runs a few different interesting shows and has for quite a time. Joel was a pioneer in all the things that we all want to do. Multi-time author. In fact, he's also why I have the button, a little bit better than the Staples That Was Easy button.
Do you want to see my button?
I do want to see your button.
Hold up.
I hope it just says when.
Nope.
Dan Pink on learning. There's a difference between compliant behavior and engaged behavior. With compliant behavior, you're doing what someone told you to do. And with engagement, you're doing something because you truly want to.
Okay. So in Santa Rosa, California, there is a museum. That museum is called the Charles M. Schulz Museum and Research Center. Yes, indeed. That Charles M. Schulz. So my family and I were there, and in the gift shop, I bought the following, which helps me with my writing. And it's this button right here. You can see it. Okay. Now, here's the thing. This is why. All right. I'm going to press it, and you're going to hear what it sounds like. All right. Here we go. Can you hear that? It's the wah, 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 wah that adults make. And I use this button every once in a while when I get frustrated and I write like some sentences that are a piece of crap. The way that I kind of come out of that is I go, because that's what I just wrote. And so I slap that button, take a break, and Charles Schulz Museum in Santa Rosa, California has been sitting on my desk for 7 years.
Charles Schulz, I saw the Reader's Digest, read the Reader's Digest version of his biography, and he, two things that really endeared me to him. He bought all of the pencils that he used to draw the script. He bought every single one that he could. He bought out the entire stock for fear that he would run out and they would discontinue them somewhere along the way. And he wanted his instrument. The other was very late in his career, very, very late. His son was taking airplane lessons, and he went very sheepishly to one of his board meetings and said, do you think I could maybe buy a little airplane or something? He had no idea what he was worth. He bought the ice skating rink in his town so that people could come and skate there. But beyond that, he had no idea. I'm cutting that whole part because who cares?
That's cool. But Charles Schulz is first of all, I mean, Peanuts is iconic. It's an interesting like little American history lesson to go to that museum. And also Charles Schulz himself was a weird dude.
He really was.
There's a very if you go through that museum, and as I said, I didn't read the biography, but if you go through that museum and get a little bit of biography, there is a very dark side to Peanuts that I certainly didn't realize when I was a kid.
Story warrior Jack Vincent is here, and he asked the question, how does this apply? I can't suddenly find the question anymore. How does it apply to corporate real estate? Like, because, and this, in this case, I think being the Chrono Type stuff, the working remotely and all that, what in the earth I mean, there's some jobs you mostly have to do in person, but corporate real estate's doing things you hate, like using virtual tours and things. Maybe that's how they get around that.
I think that's a great question, and I think it's a huge issue. I would not want to be in the commercial real estate leasing business over the next 5 years.
Oh my gosh.
I think every business owner I talk to, whether it's a small, tiny business or a large, sort of somebody running a larger enterprise, has said we need less space. So I think that is happening. So it's a matter of quantity and quality. So we need less space. I think that's going to be inevitable. The other thing is I think the space is going to be more intentional in a way that a lot of internal design in corporate offices is not very intentional at all. Because I'll give you like sort of a more abstract way of thinking about this, because people like abstraction so much. One of the most important things in when we think about our behavior, when we think about predicting other people's behavior, is what's the default? Okay, we all have defaults because we don't have to like think through every single thing every time. And for a long time, the default in white collar work was that you go to the office. That's where you do work. The default is you go to but now you could overcome that default many times. You could say, oh man, I'm not feeling good today, I'm going to work from home. Or my kid is sick, I'm going to work from home. Or I have a refrigerator being delivered, I'm going to work from home. And you can overcome that default. I think what might be happening is that the default is flipped entirely. So the default for certain kinds of white collar work will be, well, I do my work at home.
Right.
But not all the time, because I'll overcome that default and I'll go to the office for certain things only the office is good at, which is certain kinds of collaboration, certain kinds of meetings, certain kinds of interactions. And so that the office will be built to do what offices do really well. Offices are not ideal for individual people doing heads down work as I'm doing here. They're better for other kinds of things. And so the office might be smaller and it might look different.
So you're getting real grown-up questions because you're Daniel Pink. Bob Farnham asked the question, what's going to happen to colleges like Dartmouth and Harvard? Because what you said about business turning around in 3 days, it's amazing how those people had very limited seats for their online courses and suddenly they don't, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, the question of colleges is a very, I got a college student. And so I'm looking at it through her eyes. She just finished her junior year. She was summarily bounced from her dorm. This is a college where kids live in the dorms all 4 years because of space and whatnot. She was bounced from her dorm very quickly, had to go back, had to basically do her spring trimester here in her childhood bedroom, had a summer job on campus that is now a summer job in her childhood bedroom. The school is opening back up for the fall.
Wow. But
every class is remote and only half of the students are invited back to be on campus for the fall trimester. She's not one of those students. So she's going to go, she says she's going to have this college experience where literally nearly it's going to be harder.
I got you.
It's going to be harder for college. It's going to be harder for colleges to justify their tuition. I think that's a big part of it.
I think so too.
And I think that's really up in the air. Now, the thing is, just to be my reality check is that I can't remember. What was the name of the person who asked the question?
That would be Bob Farnham.
Bob. So, okay, there it is. So the Harvards and the Dartmouths, I think they're going to be fine over the long haul. And actually, I think that the community colleges are going to be fine over the long haul. It's that middle that is going to get clobbered. And like I'm a parent. I pay tuition. I like to think of myself as reasonably open-minded. I'm actually not that open-minded about paying $60,000 a year in tuition.
Right.
If one of my kids is going to go to a, forgive me for putting such a fine point on it, a third-tier liberal arts college.
Right.
Right. I mean, like, to me, it's not even a close call. It's like, I live in DC, so we're not a state. Everything's fucked up in that way. But I grew up in the shadow of Ohio State University. Okay. So I'd rather send my kid to Ohio State for a lot less than the third-tier liberal arts college. I'd rather send my kid to University of Maryland, which is a great school up the road here, than do that. So I think it's that those kinds of schools in the middle that are going to get
The Harvard and Dartmouths are going to be fine. I think the community colleges are the most innovative and forward-thinking education institutions in the country right now. It's that middle crowd that I think is going to get clobbered.
They're going to get whaled. John Harrison, who's written a book on games, asked the question, where are you seeing game mechanics come to the rescue for any kind of behavior change? Or where do you think they could be used? Have you looked at that at all?
Not a huge amount. I mean, at a broad level, I mean, game mechanics are powerful, and game mechanics are game mechanics are in some ways extraordinarily in sync with what we know about the research on human motivation. Because among the things we know on human motivation, the things that motivate us is a sense of autonomy and self-direction. So with games, you are self-directed. You move at your pace. So I can play my game at midnight. I can play my game at 7 in the morning. I can play it for an hour. I can play it for a haze of 5 hours straight. I can play for a half hour and take a break. It's entirely self-directed. And we know that people in general do work better when it's self-directed. The other thing about it is that another element of motivation is mastery. How do you get better at something? And the way that people get better at something, there are all kinds of ways that people get, well, the ways that people get better is trying stuff, experimenting, and getting quick, actionable feedback. And that's what games are, big time. Because you can fail, you can get killed and resurrect yourself, get killed and resurrect yourself, get killed and resurrect yourself. Imagine playing a game. Imagine playing a game that was configured like corporate America, where you play a game and you get your score like once every 6 months. It's like, oh, back in January, you played this game over here and you didn't do very well, you know? And so I think the game mechanics offer us a really important insight into how to motivate how people can be motivated at work through a sense of self-direction and through quick, meaningful feedback all the time.
So Rob Hatch, who works with me, asked the question, with so many companies who lean so heavily on physical amenities, their foosball table, their full fridges at Google, that sort of a thing. Google makes delicious food, by the way. How are they going to communicate or embody corporate culture remotely in lieu of physical amenities?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, actually.
Brilliant, Rob Hatch.
And no, it really is. It's actually because I do think it's a great way to look. I think it's a very insightful question because so much of culture is built around atoms and physical presence rather than bits and virtual presence. All right, and so if we're constrained in that area, we're going to have to go to another area. So my real answer to Rob's question is I have no idea, but I'll give you the way to. I'll give you something that I have noticed that I think is actually can give us some insight into this, which is that in any kind of human system, people will create their own rituals. No matter what it is, people will create their own rituals. And so what I would encourage for the people who are trying to shape corporate culture, who are thinking about corporate culture, who are concerned about corporate culture, is pay careful attention to the self-organized rituals that people are creating in this new environment. Self-organized rituals are powerful. And so instead of trying to create these new forms of culture on the top down, look for what's emerging from the bottom up and nurture and nourish those. I'll give you one experiment very quickly, Chris, that I did, this is like almost 20 years ago now, where I went into an so this is even before digital cameras. This is in a world where there were cameras. Remember those disposable cameers? Mm-hmm. You would, there'd be like 20 shots.
24, something, yeah.
And you take them to CVS and get them developed.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I did this small experiment with an organization here in Washington, and I get maybe 20 people on the team, and I said, here's what I'd like you to do. For the next week, I gave them a camera. For the next week, take these cameras, take photographs of the best part about working here and the worst part about working here. Best part about working here, worst part about working here. And so they took their pictures, I had them developed, and then I sat with people for like 15 minutes and had them talk through the photos with me. What's that about? What's that about? And here's what I got. For the best part about working here, I got pictures of pies.
Did you say pies?
Pies. Why? Because it turned out that there was this thing that went on in this office where there was a dude there, there's a guy there who worked there named Reggie, who every Friday would bring in a pie. On Thursday nights, he would make a homemade pie. On Friday, he would bring it in. And Reggie himself never thought, I just did it, what the hell? And it ended up being one of the most meaningful things for people. Like, they got even choked up about that because, wow, what a great, this is a sign that people around here care. We gather around this thing. We eat together. We look forward to it. We talk about and the thing is, this is not anything that the boss said, we're going to have Friday Pie Day.
Wow.
The boss was actually almost like, she kind of knew this was going on. But when she found out that this was the thing that people thought was really meaningful, she was like, what? Really? What? The pie? Reggie's pie? And so you look for it. So I think that the keys to that in this world are look for what people are doing in a self-organized way. As cheesy as they are, these Zoom cocktail hours are interesting because they're a self-organized, they're a self-organized ritual. I am doing something that surprisingly myself, I have these this set of very, very good friends from college who I have been friends with for like over half of my life now. I mean, it's ridiculous. And what we have started doing is basically every other week we have essentially a Zoom reunion where we have a question that we all talk about. And it sounds kind of cheap. Like if you had told me like, oh, that's what you're gonna, I said, oh, that's a little cheesy. And it's ended up being something very meaningful I've done in this. So to make a long story longer, watch self-organized, keep an eye on self-organized rituals. Interesting.
And the pie thing makes me think of Rob and I had a guy that we've worked with two different ways. Well, Rob worked with him twice. I worked with him once, Ron Hood. And he was that kind of guy. He was a very thoughtful guy. He was very much a, sweet guy. Christmas time, you'd get a box of homemade candies that he had, really slaved over the stove because you get to see the pictures now that it's Facebook Nation. I also wonder if that boss really felt really poopy that the deciding factor of what made that place great was pie. You know what I mean? Nothing they did, like no leadership thing, no like incredible like corporate culture that they went on their retreat to build. It's a stupid pie.
That's exactly my point, Chris. That's exactly my point. Now, a good leader will say, okay, I'm learning something. I'm learning something from this. And I can, like you're good at this, Chris. You can soothe the egos of the people in charge by telling them in response to that, well, you created a workplace where people felt comfortable doing that. This guy didn't feel the need to ask for permission to do this. He just went ahead and did it. And so, but I think that those are really powerful. There's somebody on there who said, and forgive me because I can't find it, but there's somebody on there who said they send people Montreal bagels.
Oh, Carol sends them. Do you want some? Do you need some Montreal bagels? Carol does those video explainer videos too, Dan. So, she's a good person to know.
I love Montreal bagels. They are my favorite. They are my favorite bagel.
We'll hook it up. So, get me the address. We'll get that done.
Here's the thing: is you can't get them. You can't get them in Washington D.C.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Nothing good is there besides Daniel Pink. That's what we've learned.
It's puzzling that Montreal bagels have not made their way to the United States very much. I mean, up where you guys are, maybe, but down here in Washington D.C., which the old line about Washington D.C. is that it has the charm of the North and the efficiency of the South. So we don't have Montreal bagels down here, but they're fantastic. I have to say, Montreal smoked meats, we don't have those here. I am still amazed that we don't have that poutine has not been a bigger deal here in the United States. Probably up where you're a Mainer, so poutine is probably
it sneaks in.
Yeah, but that poutine basically stops around Vermont.
Right. It's funny. Twice now in this thing, you've made me think of this Ron Hood guy because Ron loves paper. Ron served one of his jobs was sort of as my personal assistant because he was basically my official grown-up. And so he had binders of Chris Brogan stuff. And when Ron and I finally had to part ways, he didn't know what to do with them. So I think I still have 7 or 8, but Rob has them, 7 or 8 binders of how to work with me, which is terrifying to me because I feel like I'm pretty easygoing, but I guess I'm not. So yeah. I love now that I know two very passionate things of you, Montreal bagels and paper. I feel like that's a good catch up. You know, I think we've got it. Oh, listen.
I'm Montreal bagels and paper. So I'm basically like a 73-year-old guy.
Yeah.
I got to go back to my front porch and tell the kids to get off my lawn.
Get off the lawn. Yeah. You probably have some black socks to put on your sandals too. I get it all. It's lined right up. You know, they don't make songs like that anymore. That's what you say on your Zoom calls. If you're good or bad at hiring and firing and then nurturing, the culture grows on its own with just a little bit of tending. A contagious culture of support or a contagious culture of commiseration. I would use any word besides contagious. Otherwise, I would agree with you, Deborah.
Yeah. But I think it's a lovely phrase, that culture of commiseration, because I think a lot of workplaces are like that, and so people, you can't foster a sense of belonging through a culture of commiseration, but it comes from a shared enemy.
I am a big fan of enemy. I am a big fan of, if there's no enemy, make the enemy. I think that it's a good. There's two things I like to say. One is that, you know, no one ever wants a flag that we rally away from. Like, so don't flags, don't help anybody.
Good point.
But do attack does help everybody.
That's good.
So Ron used to say, if you need to do it more than twice, it needs a system. I imagine that Dan Pink lives by those words.
I aspire to live by those words. Yeah, I'm a sinner when it comes to the Church of Productivity, but I'm trying to be safe.
Steve Garfield from stevegarfield.com, one of the absolutely legendary video bloggers, the guy people like Jimmy Fallon asked for help when he wanted to do video blogging, says one last plug for the adventures of Johnny Bunko, which,
Thanks,
you know, place in my heart because of the illustrated nature of it. I was a comic book guy growing up, so that was the thing. Daniel, I'm going to let you go for here. This is good. We had a really good chance to catch up. We did a lot of things. I think it's a good place to end it, unless you have something else we need to talk about.
I just had so much fun talking to you, Chris. All kinds
Means
of
the world
I
to
don't
me.
get a chance to talk about. Like, I literally have not had a conversation about Montreal bagels in 8 years.
Wow. And I bet you don't exactly get to nerd out about paper either. So,
you know what? I'm glad that your audience gave me a little love for the paper rather than eye rolling and disdain for being stuck in the old ways of doing things.
It's
that Team Brogan out there.
Thing of beauty.
Brogan.
All right, I'm letting you go. Thank you so much for your time. Everybody else, you know what the story is. I'm hitting the button. Get out of here already.